I've learned that sometimes the smallest, most ordinary moments carry the heaviest consequences, like the way a single glance can unravel years of carefully built walls. That night, I wasn't looking for anyone to notice me. I was just a tired single dad, working a side job in a tux that wasn't mine, hoping to cover rent and keep the lights on. If you believe in doing what's right even when no one's watching, go ahead and like this video and subscribe, because that's exactly how this began, with a choice no one asked me to make. The Waverly Foundation Charity Gala wasn't the kind of place I ever expected to find myself. The air smelled faintly of orchids and money, the kind of crisp, perfumed wealth you can't fake. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables dressed in white linen and gold trim, the hum of polite conversation barely audible over the quartet in the corner. My job that night was simple. Provide discreet security coverage for the VIP lounge, keep the donors comfortable, and stay invisible. I'd pulled the shift as a favor to a buddy in private security, swapping out my EMT uniform for a borrowed black tux that pulled uncomfortably at my shoulders. My daughter Lily was with Mrs. Harper from 2 doors down, her favorite sitter, curled up with a stack of picture books and a promise from me that I'd be home before midnight. I was sipping black coffee from a porcelain cup worth more than my week's groceries when the side doors burst open and Eleanor Waverly, yes, that Eleanor Waverly, swept in. She was every inch the magazine profile, tall, poised, wearing an emerald silk gown that caught the light with every step, diamonds at her ears the size of grapes. But it wasn't her that caught my attention. It was the baby in her arms, red-faced, wailing, kicking in panic. She was trying to calm him, bouncing gently, whispering something I couldn't hear over the music, but her grip was clumsy, the kind of hold that said she loved him fiercely but wasn't used to this kind of hands-on chaos. Her entourage trailed behind her, assistants with tablets and earpieces, all of them offering solutions that sounded more like panic suggestions. We can call the nanny. There's a room upstairs. Should I get a bottle? Eleanor's jaw tightened, as if the entire room's eyes on her were nails digging into her skin. My instincts, those deeply ingrained from years of holding patients steady in ambulances, from cradling Lily through ear infections and fevers, kicked in before my brain had time to argue. I was across the room in 3 strides. "May I asked, holding my arms out. She hesitated for just a fraction of a second, and in that moment, I saw something flash across her face. Not fear exactly, but vulnerability. She handed him over. He was heavier than I expected, warm and squirming, his little fists clenching at the lapel of my jacket. I shifted him into the crook of my arm, my palms supporting his head, and began the slow, rhythmic bounce that had been my go-to with Lily when she was an infant. My voice came out low and steady, humming an old lullaby my late wife used to sing. Within 30 seconds, the wails softened into hiccups, then quiet breaths. You could feel the air shift in the room. The string quartet even faltered for half a beat, the way they might if someone dropped a glass. Eleanor stared at me like I'd just performed a magic trick, her lips parting slightly, her diamond-studded hand pressed lightly to her collarbone. "You have children," she said, not so much asking as stating. "A daughter," I replied, keeping my voice low. "She's 4. I could feel the baby's heartbeat slowing against my chest, that instinctive trust infants have for anyone who feels safe. Around us, whispers traveled like ripples. "Who is he? Is that her baby? Did you see how fast?" I didn't care. I wasn't doing this for them. I caught Eleanor's gaze again, and for a second it felt like the rest of the room had faded. There was something in her eyes, gratitude, yes, but also a flicker of recognition, like she was trying to place me in a puzzle she didn't realize she was building. One of her assistants stepped forward, clearly ready to reclaim the baby, but she stopped them with a subtle raise of her hand. "What's your name?" she asked me, her voice softened, stripped of the practiced polish I'd heard in interviews and speeches. "Evan," I said. "Evan Carter." She repeated it like she wanted to remember it, then glanced down at her son. I assumed it was her son, now fast asleep against my chest. He never settles for anyone," she said quietly, almost to herself. "Not even with me, not like that." I shrugged, though inside my chest there was a faint ache. "Sometimes it's just a matter of finding the rhythm," I said. I didn't tell her that the same thing had been true for me when Lily was born, that I'd been terrified I wouldn't know how to comfort her, and that it had taken losing my wife to learn just how much children depend on the steady presence of someone who won't walk away. A server passed by with a tray of champagne, and I noticed Eleanor's glassy-eyed stare tracking me as I gently transferred her son back into her arms. This time, she held him differently, more confidently, as if my brief handling had reminded her of something instinctive she'd forgotten. "Thank you, Mr. Carter," she said, her voice formal again, though her grip on my sleeve as she spoke told a different story. "You've done more for me in 2 minutes than most people here will do all year." I wanted to tell her it was nothing, that any decent person would have stepped in, but looking around the room at the silent, well-dressed crowd, I wasn't sure that was true. So I just nodded and stepped back, fading into my assigned corner again. But Eleanor didn't turn away. She studied me for another long moment, and I swear there was a question hovering in her mind, one she wasn't ready to ask yet. I thought that was the end of it, that she'd forget about the nameless security guy who happened to calm her baby at a gala. But as she walked away, I caught her glancing back once, a quick, almost imperceptible look, and something told me our paths weren't done crossing. I didn't know then how right I was. I didn't expect to see Eleanor Waverly again so soon, but 2 days later she was standing outside the EMT station in Midtown, looking wildly out of place in a dove-gray coat and black leather gloves, her hair caught up against the wind. It was the kind of bitter, early winter afternoon when most people hurry past with their heads down, but she was just waiting. I was coming back from a run to restock supplies when I saw her. No entourage this time, no designer gown, just a woman scanning the street until her eyes landed on me. "Evan Carter," she said like she'd been rehearsing the name. "Do you have a minute?" I should have said no. I had reports to file and a shift to finish, and people like her didn't usually bring good news to people like me. But something in her tone, deliberate, almost careful, made me nod. She followed me inside, her heels clicking on the concrete floor, her gaze roaming over the mismatched lockers and battered coffee maker like she'd stepped into another planet. We sat at one of the scarred breakroom tables, and she got straight to the point. "You were at the gala because you needed the extra work, weren't you?" It wasn't an accusation, more an observation, but it still put me on edge. "I was covering for a friend," I said, my voice cautious. "Why?" She hesitated, like she was measuring the weight of what she was about to say. "Because I think you're exactly the kind of person I've been looking for." The words made no sense until she leaned forward, her voice dropping. "Do you know the name Claire Mitchell?" It took me a second to place it, and when I did, it was like someone had cracked open a locked drawer in my memory. Claire, she was a nurse. Pediatric oncology, Phoenix Children's. My throat tightened. She was my nephew's nurse. Eleanor finished for me, her eyes softening. 2 years ago. She was extraordinary. She made the worst days bearable. She talked about her daughter, about how much she admired her husband's work as a paramedic. She never mentioned his name, but she said he had a way of making people feel safe. My chest felt tight in a way that had nothing to do with the cold air I just walked in from. "Claire was my wife," I said quietly. "She passed away 3 years ago." Eleanor's lips parted, but for a moment she said nothing, as if recalibrating. "Then I suppose you know she changed lives," she said finally. "I've thought about her every week since. And when you took my son into your arms the other night, it felt like I was watching one of her stories come to life." I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. She reached into her coat and pulled out a small folder, sliding it across the table to me. Inside was an official-looking document, the crest of the Waverly Foundation at the top, my name typed neatly below. "I want to offer you a position," she said. "Director of a new program we're launching for single parents navigating medical crises. Your salary would be more than you're making now, and we'd cover Lily's school tuition, any medical needs, everything." My instinct was to push it back across the table. Offers like this come with strings, and I'd spent years cutting myself free of knots I didn't tie. "I can't accept charity," I said flatly. Her gaze sharpened, but there was no offense in it, only resolve. "It's not charity. It's a job, and you're the only person I trust to run it. You understand what these families go through. You've lived it." She paused, her voice softening. "And it would be a way for me to keep a promise." When I asked what she meant, she told me about her nephew's final days, about sitting in that hospital room and telling Claire she wished there was something she could do for her in return. She told me, Eleanor said, her voice catching, "If you ever want to do something for me, Find a way to help my family if I can't be there. I never thought I'd have the chance. Until you walked into that room the other night. The room seemed to go quiet around us, the distant murmur of dispatch calls fading under the weight of her words. I wanted to tell her I didn't need her help, that I'd been making it work, that I wasn't some charity case waiting for a handout. But the truth was, I'd been patching holes in a sinking boat for years, and I was running out of patches. I thought about Lily, about her wide smile, and the way she still asked if Mommy was coming home someday. I thought about the overdue bills stacked on my kitchen counter. And I thought about Claire, about the kind of person she'd been. The kind of person who wouldn't turn down an opportunity to help others just because pride got in the way. Eleanor must have sensed my hesitation because she leaned back, giving me space. You don't have to decide now, she said. But I'd like you to come by the foundation headquarters tomorrow. Meet the team. See what we're building. No pressure. She stood, buttoning her coat, and for the first time since she'd walked in, I saw something flicker in her eyes that looked almost like fear. The fear that I might say no and she'd lose the chance to fulfill a promise she'd been carrying for years. As she walked toward the door, she turned back once. Your wife was right about you, she said softly. You make people feel safe. And just like at the gala, before I could think of what to say, she was gone, leaving me with the folder, a dozen unanswered questions, and the strange feeling that the life I'd been clinging to was about to be turned completely upside down. The Waverly Foundation headquarters looked like it belonged on the cover of an architecture magazine. Glass walls, sunlight pouring into open spaces, the kind of place that made you forget it was still part of the same city I'd been fighting to survive in. Eleanor was waiting for me in the lobby, dressed in a simple navy blouse and slacks, no diamonds, no entourage. Come on, she said with a small smile. I want to show you something. She led me past offices filled with people on calls, planning events, meeting with families. Every door we passed had photos, kids in hospital gowns grinning beside their parents, thank you notes scribbled in crayon. It was quiet in the way a place built on hard work is quiet. No wasted motion, no idle hands. She stopped in front of one framed photograph. Claire, sitting at a hospital bed, reading to a little boy whose smile was all teeth and bravery. My throat tightened. Your wife, Eleanor said softly. She changed this place before it even existed. She told me then that the program wasn't just an idea. It was already funded, structured, waiting for someone to lead it. Someone who understood what it meant to fight for a child while the world kept demanding rent, bills, and shifts you couldn't afford to miss. You don't have to answer now, she said again, but I could tell she already knew my answer. I thought of Lily, of what it would mean to never again have to choose between being there for her and keeping us afloat. I thought of Claire's promise to always fight for her family, and how sometimes the best way to honor someone is to keep fighting even when they can't. I'll do it, I said finally. Her relief was visible, not a grand gesture, just a small, genuine exhale. Then let's get to work, she replied. 6 months later, the first families we helped were sitting in the same lobby I'd walked through that morning, holding their kids, filling out forms they could actually understand. Lily was in the corner coloring with Eleanor's son, both of them laughing like they'd known each other forever. I realized then that this wasn't charity, and it never had been. It was a promise, one Claire made, one Eleanor kept, and one I'd carry forward. Sometimes the people you save end up saving you right back. And sometimes family isn't who you're born to, but who walks in when the rest of the room steps back.